welcome back to California Life Podcast. And we have today Ms. Galina Dorris back with us. We will be talking about the law of immigration, the law of business. And Galina, thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed the episode you recorded with Sergey. You shared a lot of very interesting insights, but I love more complicated questions. Obviously, there is a lot of information on different types of visas, working, non-working, immigration, non-immigration. But I would like to begin our conversation with how do you work with employers, and how do you explain these employers, these companies, that it might be beneficial to hire a talent from overseas versus maybe from domestic market?
Sure, great question. It might seem complicated and overwhelming at first for the employers. So I think that's why it's important that you schedule a consultation, because just doing Google search, you're going to get overwhelmed by what steps. And you have two big steps. Is first of all, go through PERM, for example, certification with Department of Labor. And it might sound very scary, right? And often employers ask us if that's going to open them up for additional liabilities and things like that. And then, of course, there's a second step of submission of the application to USCIS. So what we do with the employers, when we work with employers, we take on all the burden of the paperwork and making sure that the employer can get certification, they don't get overwhelmed, and we can answer all the questions for you. For example, we can work on targeting your job description for specific talents that you're seeking, right? Helping you with hiring process, right? Making sure that you qualify for specific federal levels when it comes to wage prevalence levels and so on. Again, our role is going to be to get the interview with you, right? Get your information, and from there, we facilitate the entire process. We help you to prepare the packages, submit the documentation, make sure you don't, you don't run behind, right? And you do everything that is asked from you by USCIS. There are a lot of benefits of hiring someone with talents, again, because you're getting that diversity right into your agency. We had great responses from the employers that did end up getting immigrants right from different countries, right, as their employers, as they see the difference in background, right, a difference in thinking, right, some innovations and so on, right. So there's a lot of great benefits of hiring such employees, and I'm just asking that employers don't get overwhelmed. Just trust the process, hire the right immigration attorney to help you through the process. It is not as scary as it might seem on Google search.
Except for the diversity, which obviously is a nice benefit, but it doesn't really necessarily bring money in. What are the other benefits that the company or the companies can get from hiring talent, a professional from overseas?
Sure. Ideas, right? And depending what employment category we're talking about. For example, if you're talking about someone who is in educational, right, area, of, for example, if you're hiring researcher from abroad, right, or someone who studied math or science abroad, right, you get the different perspective, right, and you might be able to continue working on research, right, with that talent. In that specific area and so on. It could be someone who's specializing in IT, right, and can help you develop your agency and get you to that next level, right? So it really will depend on the areas of employment that we're discussing today, but there's definitely a lot of benefits.
Right. If you could share with us which employers or maybe their fields you've worked with in the past, maybe a little bit about the experience working with them or working with employers in this specific field. For example, maybe a medical field could be a little less complicated than IT or vice versa.
Sure. So far, we have worked, yes, with medical field, with educational institution that hire the teachers or researchers from other countries. then airlines, I mentioned pilots before, and of course, smaller businesses, right, that were very, very specialized. For example, we helped this business who produces costumes for filmmakers down in South California. So it was very, very specialized niche, right, of the employment. So I would say the difference is it depends how big or small is the employer that we're working with. So for example, if we're working with very established, let's say, institution, right, and they're hiring researcher or teacher, they most likely will have their financial records in place, right? They most likely will have their website developed, their job descriptions, they have hiring process, because this is a massive employer, right? Whereas comparing to smaller business owner, right, it might seem more overwhelming because they might not have this developed yet, right? They might not have very established, robust hiring process, or they need help with financial aspect and so on. And again, that's something that we can help them, right? Or developing job description, right? Or they're not sure when I'm asking them where they would fall within wage prevalence a category, they're unsure, and that's something we can help them to establish as well.
Right. What I have learned online, and I don't think if I can trust that or not, a lot of processes in this immigration field have changed since the pandemic. Could you please share with us if that's the truth or not, or maybe some insights that you have when you work with different talents on working visas or immigration visas?
Sure. There's definitely been an impact with pandemic, and also with all the conflicts that we're seeing, right, worldwide. So everyone needs to be aware that this timing processing is doubled or tripled comparing to previous years. So please be aware of that. It's easy to check. Anyone can go to USCIS website, just click on tools, case processing time, and it will give you exact timing for the process of specific petition, application, and so on. I see that there's a lot of misinformation, or some were thinking that it will only take, let's say, 6 months. It's taking more than that, right? And they're unaware of the processing times. So there's definitely delays. There's also a huge, right, the situation we have right now at the Mexican border, right, with asylum situation, where there's 2.5 million asylum claims just from last year that are currently pending. And that number is higher right now. So you can imagine that delays the processes for everyone else through USCIS, right? But the good side, let's talk about the good side of pandemic, is that now judges, immigration judges, if we are in immigration courts, right, are more open of having us representing our cases by video conferencing, like Zoom and so on. So the questions that I get very often from clients, they're feeling unease, when the attorney is representing them by Zoom. But I just want everyone to know that's totally acceptable. Entire immigration system is definitely going towards electronic processes, and we're using electronic tools in our fields.
Well, before we transition to the other visa types, that is very interesting that you've touched the topic of this immigration, which is coming from the South America. We probably still have this wave coming from the Eastern Europe. And I don't know if you have any cases coming from Israel or Palestine. How are these cases, this flow from 3 different, maybe more, places from all over the world? How are they impacting your work, the system, all the processes in general?
Sure. Yes, in fact, when it comes to, for example, asylum cases and employment cases, most of the clients that we have right now are from Iran, Iraq, from Pakistan and Afghanistan, and also the countries from Central America and others, Canada. We have quite a few employees that would like to work and migrate to United States. The difference is that, of course, us as attorneys, right, or immigration experts, we have to really understand the law of that country too that we're working with, right, and make sure we don't, we resolve any specific issues that are very specific to this client. For example, we might have a client from Canada who's trying to migrate here for work, and they have children, right? Well, I need to make sure Canada is okay, that the children are going to be there. I need to find out, was she divorced, where's the father of children, right? And so on. So there's very unique questions, and you need to adapt and know the law, right? And have to do the search, right? And understand what's happening in that specific government of this country.
Well, it's great to know that you have such a personal approach, because I know that California has so many legal companies and so many lawyers, and it's really rare to find a company or a professional like yourself that would, focus on personal details of the client. Back to the types of visas. I know in our private conversation you were saying that you would advise some types for this specific clients, or an immigration type like EB for other types of clients. How do you analyze, how do you distinguish which person would work better with which type of visa?
Sure. And just like you pointed out, Victor, each client is very unique. I have not seen any client that has similar stories. They have, very unique circumstances. And so that's a process, right, for us to understand your specific circumstances from everything, where you are in your country right now, what status you have here, have you entered here legally or undocumented, right? Is your status expired? Just so many questions to answer for us to determine what employer you will potentially qualify for. Then, of course, experience that you have, education that you have, talents, specific talents that you have. What is your intent? Are you trying to migrate and stay here and get the residency green card, right? Or you just want to explore, just be here for a short period of time? Do you have prospective employers? Do you need help finding those employers, and so on? So a lot of questions to answer, so that way we can give options. I love giving clients options. I love to have a plan A, B, E, and C. So that way, if something doesn't work, we have another option. And they're very aware of the timelines, because that's people's life, right? And I want to make sure they can plan accordingly while they're waiting.
Obviously, each case is different, but if you could share with us, which were your most complicated cases that you've gone through?
I think it's that small business that I was mentioning about with costume production, just because I have worked with employers, what I call giant employers, right, that have their business established for decades, right, and they have massive employment, right, and so on. That was such a small employer, and they were just starting out their own company, so there was a lot of background information that we needed to help her. Like, she did not have a website, so we ran into issue, how are we going to post the jobs, right? So I had to be very creative, utilizing social media and other platforms. She needed help with job description. She needed help with establishing her public access profile. There's just a lot of pieces, right? And I also had to do intensive interview with the client, with employee, to really understand what, the special skills that she has, right, that she can offer to United States, right, and really, make it very descriptive. So it's basically advocating, for this client and for this employer, so that USCIS approves the process.
Right. Obviously, I'm a big supporter of your work, because we do need more taxpayers. Why this company, which you mentioned, I assume they're based in Hollywood-ish area, why they were willing to hire a talent from overseas and not from local market? If you could share details. Obviously, I know there's a rule.
Sure, absolutely. In general, this specific immigrant had skills of sewing and working with her hands, producing handmade costumes. Specifically, I don't know if I'll pronounce it correctly, Renaissance,
Yeah.
Yes, so that's very specific,
Okay.
right? And it was all handmade, and also she had ability to work with leather, which I understand is really hard to work with. So she was very, very specialized, and I guess they were producing costumes for specific film, or I don't know what it is. So they really needed her, and her skills.
Right. Do you mind sharing where is this talent from?
She's from Ukraine.
Oh, okay. Because I thought of Mexico for some time. I know a lot of beautiful artists from Mexico. They do such a brilliant handwork. Back to types of visas, which you were mentioning, and there's so many of them. which ones do you believe are relatively, because each case is different, but which are easier to work with, and which of these are a little bit more complex? And additional question to that, I assume, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the talent or the client would always ask if you can, guarantee the success, and obviously no. But based on this question, which visas would you recommend to which types of people, and they would relatively have a higher chance of succeeding?
Mm-hmm. Great question. So any categories in EB visas, of course, are a little bit more challenging to work with, just because your talent needs to have, higher degree, very, very talented, let's just say, right? So for EB1 categories, those are categories where it's national interest for the United States to bring those talents here, right? And employer needs to go through process of PERM certification with Department of Labor, which is more time intensive and extensive and things like that. The most accessible visas, I would say H category visas, and there could be like H1A categories, where you're here just for the season, or H2Bs categories, which is the process is not as extensive. You don't need PERM certification as an employer. You only need labor condition certification. But the problem is lottery. I don't know if you heard about it, but every year we only have a small window that is open for a lottery. Right now it's open between March 1st through March 22nd, where you as employer submit the application. And there's not much information that is needed from you as an employer, but it's a lottery. And we have 65,000 openings each year. And generally we have over 100,000 of applicants. But there is a pathway to avoid this numerical limitation if you can work with a nonprofit or institution, educational institution that is associated with nonprofit or researcher or higher education institution. Then you can apply for H-1B cap exempt visa, where you still apply through the lottery, but you're not limited to that numerical limitation anymore. So there's a way higher chances, right, to get such visa.
Well, this is why you are successful in the business. You know the inside information. I had no idea about this gap, so good to know. Which types of talent do you suggest to apply for H visa? And except for this numerical limitation, does this type have any other limitations?
Sure. So those visas under H-2B category, they need a specialized training for at least of 2 years, which I think majority of people will satisfy, right? If you're an adult, you have a education from abroad, right? And you most likely were working in specific field, right? So I actually would suggest those, especially right now. I've been suggesting to a lot of doctors or nurses that are applying and that would like to get an employment here to file for such visa, specifically for H-1B cap visa, because there's a lot of educational institutions that would be interested to work with you. For example, you can apply if you have a degree from back home. Let's say you have bachelor's and master's, right, in research or math or science. You can easily apply with one of the nonprofit schools here and become a science teacher or a math teacher. And that's a pathway for you, right? Because H-1B and H-2B visas do have dual intent, which means you can eventually get a sponsorship and get your green card over here. So that's definitely applicable and to broader category, I would say, of the community.
Right. While working in Hollywood, we've witnessed a lot of talent coming with O visas. I think athletes, they had P types of visas. How are they complexity-wise easier or more complicated comparing to H types?
Sure. So the good part that they will not need labor condition certifications, right, from Labor Department for those visas, but you still need to go through USCIS, right? You still need to file your petition. Now, if you can show me some kind of certificate, Victor, that I can work with, right, and explain to me what talent you have, and also it depends, how much your employer really wants to help, right, to facilitate for this visa. So it really depends, if I have an athlete who can provide me their records, and what games and so on, right, then I can easily attach that to the petition and convince, right, and that's our role, to advocate and convince USCIS so that they can approve your petition, right?
Right.
So I feel like a lot of times what we do is really getting into under your skin, I would say, understanding who you are as a person, right? So I can do best advocacy for you, so I can get that maybe extra letter of support from your previous employer. Maybe if you're an athlete, maybe I can get a letter from your previous coach that has worldwide recognition and things like that, right? So I really need to understand the situation, but if you can provide me the certification, then the chances are that you will get approved with right submission of documentation.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing with us. Another question, again related to this mass flow of new immigrants. I have read that for the Ukrainian people, U.S. government created a special U4U program. Could you please share with our audience what that is? Because to me, but I might be wrong, I'm not a lawyer, obviously, it doesn't seem like a visa. It's like a status in the middle of nowhere. What it is, for how long does it work, and what are the options for these people if they can or cannot transition to any types of visas which are actual visas?
Mm-hmm. Sure, Victor. And we get a lot of questions like that. So you're absolutely correct that U4U is a program. It's not an immigration benefit, right? It's not visa. It just gives the permission for Ukrainians to stay here, to work and go to school. They get work permit, they get social security, right? But it doesn't have any pathway, unfortunately, to any permanent stay, right? So you're absolutely correct. They're kind of in a limbo, right? And you never know for how long the status is going to go on. So far, it's been extended, but we don't know for how long. And again, the programs like that are really facilitated by, well, I should say immigration overall in our country is under control of Congress and solely Congress. But president can have their executive powers, right, to make memorandums, amendments, and maybe do special programs just like U4U. But most of the time, that's going to be temporary basis, right? So what I would recommend, right, the three categories, right? So usually when someone with U4U asks me about the pathways, one is going to be employment. They can absolutely apply for the same categories that we were mentioning of employment visa, either EB categories or H categories, LR, and so on, right? Or they can apply. I always ask if they have any family, right? If they can facilitate family reunification, right? If they have immediate family members here that are residents or have citizenship, right? And of course, with some of them, there might be, unfortunately, victims of crimes. And I can talk more about this later, T visas and U visas that have embedded pathway for a green card, right? And in some categories, it could be asylum, which is most of the time I want, right? But it could be depending on specific circumstances of that person.
Right. How does this program U4U, I want to say, mess up the whole immigration field, or it doesn't? Because so many people are coming here, they have the status, they use it, obviously, they get their work, they do whatever they want. As you just mentioned, there is no exact timeline. It was extended, but you have no idea when it's going to be the end of it. And we have so many people coming in. Does it mess up the whole immigration system, or it doesn't really impact it?
Well, for U4U program right now, specifically when it comes to, for example, case processing time with USCIS, USCIS kind of, well, there are waivers available for those applicants, anyone who is citizen of Ukraine, right, under U4U program, so they don't have to pay very extensive fees sometimes for various petitions, right? Also, there is a faster case processing times of any applications. Let's say if you have U4U program, right? candidate that applies for employment visa, they most likely will wait less than someone else, right? I wouldn't say, you know, I wouldn't say that there is a much of negative impact right now, because this is a legal pathway, I would say, that is facilitated, right, through United States government. So I wouldn't say so much that it created a chaos for us, for anyone who is working in immigration. I think it's just unknown and difficulties for those, because the questions I get, right, what do you know, do you know with the new election and with the new president, do you know what will happen to U4U program? And the answer is no, I do not know, because it is temporary, right, status. So that's unknown, right? And the difficulties that there's so far no pathway, and what do they do, right? If they can't find an employer that can sponsor them, they don't have a family here, they don't qualify under TU visa categories, right? There's really, that I feel like a very stressful stage, right? Where you are in unknown for unknown time as well.
Right. Well, that's the thing, that they probably should think in advance and consult with a lawyer in advance, like, hey, I'm thinking of getting into U4U, but what are the chances, or what are the options? So again, it's a theoretical question, but let's say the time comes when, I don't think it does matter which president is going to be. As you mentioned, it's more of a Congress decision, but the time comes and the program is over, right? We probably have a couple of million people. They came under this program. The program is over. What chances? What are the options that they can? What can they do? They can find an employer, or, as you said, a member of a family. Do they have to go back to another country to change the status, or they can change it in the U.S.? What is the process? What can they do?
Sure. If you're specifically speaking about employment opportunities, no, you don't need, because they entered the United States legally, right? That means they were admitted, which is a separate issue, and we can have separate talk about being admitted, not admitted into United States. Since they're being admitted legally to United States, they don't have to exit the country to adjust their status. A lot of times, actually, people do think about the repercussions of U4U program. So a lot of times I will have someone who does have U4U. We reapply to get the status extended, or TPS, right, temporary protective status, which is similar, right? So that way they have, my client has legal status in the country right now, and I'm working on more permanent solution, right, on finding employer, right, working with the employer and so on, because I want to avoid any unlawful presence in the United States. So I always will focus. Clients will come in and they'll have an idea, they want to stay here permanently. And I'll say, okay, great, that's going to be our plan A, right? I'm going to work on finding an employer for you and so on. But meanwhile, it's, I worry that you're here lawfully. So sometimes, I have to resolve those issues and make sure they have work permits right now and social security numbers, and maybe apply for U4U or TPS programs, right, to get that lawful presence while we're working on long-term goals.
Right, right. So except for the employer, family reunion, or whichever case they can do with the family, what other options can these people hope for?
Like I said, there could be an option for a T visa or U visa only if you're a victim of crime or victim of human trafficking, which obviously is not going to be broad, right, spectrum. Really, besides that, there's no other choices as of right now. So again, that's something we are, David and I are in National League of Immigration Attorneys, or AILA, where we are with other attorneys through the countries, are advocating and asking Congress to, to work on this solution, right? To have a permanent pathway for U4U candidates and so on. But again, as of right now, we're unaware of what the future holds for those with U4U program.
Makes sense. Well, thank you, Galina. My last question. You've worked with so many different stories of different people. If you could extract 3 main pieces of advice you would give, or you give to your clients, what would they be?
Sure. One, I think, is definitely get your information from the right sources. There is a lot of misconception, and I see this a lot, even with asylum applications and so on, where simply someone made an application for you, didn't put input information correctly, and now you are in very challenging position, and we have a higher burden, to work with, where there's already mistakes been made. So I would say, even when you think, oh, this is a simple work permit or social security number and so on, check where you're getting your information from. That's going to be one. Second, check. Have a consultation if that's possible. And I know sometimes it's the financial issue, but maybe, don't be in rush to apply for various immigration benefits without really understanding, because what will happen sometimes, it depends what you're applying for, but you might apply for a few different things that will contradict each other. And when it gets to USCIS, USCIS will review your cases as fraud, and then you're precluded from moving forward. But you were unaware, right? And you were just applying for different benefits for you. And then also case processing times right now. Please, they're being extended tremendously, and people are hoping, even with marriages or family reunification right now, they're really hoping I will apply for my husband, let's say back in Pakistan, and it's going to be 3 months and he's going to be here. No, the timelines are just outrageous as of right now. So please know this, because you might have other options available for you. And if you already applied for family reunification, you won't be able to apply for tourist visa for your husband. And that means you're separated. I had clients who applied for different categories, and husband and wife were separated for over 10 years. That's a
That's
long
tough.
time. That's a
That's
long
tough.
time. So check the case processing time as well.
Yeah. Well, Galina, thank you so much for coming to the show today. I think that we've shared a lot of really important information. We'll continue working to deliver more to the audience, to maybe potential clients of yours. And I would finish this episode today by saying that whenever you hire a good attorney, good lawyer, don't think of it as a cost. I think it's investment, because if you save 200, 300, 500 bucks, I'm not sure what is the fee, you actually might lose way more. So make sure to work with great professionals. We're bringing them to you, and stay tuned. Follow our next episodes.